Okay, good. So the first thing being dealing with the state of being in stress. And you talked to us about the emotional side of it as well.
Yeah, I think that's really relevant for a lot of people. I think there are strong emotional background patterns or issues going on around the illness. One thing that's fascinated me ongoingly is actually how much relationship there is between almost stored emotion, so emotion we haven't been able to contact or express, and the state of stress, or even actually things like pain in the body. Now,
and also that's interesting as well with people with fibromyalgia, because that pain seems to be the main thing that differentiates fibromyalgia from ME and chronic fatigue.
Yeah. Although, of course, as we know, it's a kind of slightly woolly definition actually for many people. And lots of people have the diagnosis of both simultaneously. But yes, I have genuinely been fascinated by this over the time that I've worked. And there genuinely seems to be a strong link between physical pain and emotionally held stuff, if you like. And most people, by the time they've burnt out, have a fair bit of emotionally held stuff.
Yeah, I remember what someone once said, that things that are not being expressed emotionally have to go somewhere. Yeah. And often physical pain can be the expression of things that are not being emotionally expressed.
I think that's true, and maybe that sounds esoteric to some people out there, but the more that we work with it, the more that we can see that that actually genuinely does seem to be the case. And we've had lots of clients work through their physical pain symptoms by working emotionally with what's happening, with things like emotional freedom technique, which is one of the toolkits that we use. So it can make a massive difference to physical symptoms. The other thing to say is actually, and again, tell me if this makes sense, but for a lot of people, there are emotional kind of contents to the way that they're physically feeling. And we can see that if we start to look at the words that we use. So when we're tired, we're actually kind of exhausted or drained, and drained could describe something emotional or it could describe something physical. So those kinds of descriptions give us a bit of a clue that very often a physical state that we're in has emotional background content to it as well. There are different kinds of tiredness, different kinds of fatigue, and there is a fatigue that is quite significantly emotionally driven, where we just feel heavy and drained and emotionally exhausted.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, the people that maybe they're watching this, they're thinking, you know, this just sounds a bit too much and a bit too radical. I think the thing that I always say is that we may not like it, it may not be the way we want it to be, but it is what it is. And I know that I was hugely resistant to the role of psychology in my illness when I had ME. But the point that I stopped resisting it and said, well, you know what, let's explore this. Like, maybe it is true that something new kind of does open up with that.
I think that's really true. I think one of the key things that I find as a massive factor in recovery, and people who recover and can really sort of go through that journey reasonably easily, tends to be the attitude of curiosity and real openness to go to try things. I was the same as you. I would have, laughed in your face if you'd said some of this. And it's only really the experience of having gone through it, both personally, but also as a practitioner, really, to see the potential of the body and to see the complexity of the system. We're so arrogant in a way as to assume that we understand how it works and that it's simple and it's a machine and actually, there is massive complexity to the body, to the mind, to this system, energy and emotionally, in every way. So we have to, I think, be open to it, because the reality is traditional medical models don't work for most people dealing with CFS, ME and fibromyalgia. So we've got to look elsewhere. We've got to start to open that up and explore what the possibilities are. So, yeah, I think that's very valid.
Yeah, no, good. And we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. And I was just thinking that we've talked about the role of psychology in actually treating the illness and recovery. Yeah. But I think there's also a role for people in terms of staying positive, staying inspired, staying motivated. Sure. What would you say about that? People that either are watching this that have ME or people which are just interested from a life point of view of, going for something very difficult and keeping that level of inspiration that things can change. What would you say about that?
It's a tough one. It's a good one. I think it's really valid. I think that for a lot of people, it's not a real smooth upwards curve recovery, that there are kind of bits and pieces and obstacles that get in the way, and that's part of the learning. So staying inspired is really key. I think sometimes having other people around you who you can connect to, who understand what you're going through, is pretty key. I find that a lot of our patients say, it's so good to talk to someone who gets it. I also think, for myself, I think this is true for you, we listen to stuff that inspired us. We watched things that inspired us, read things that inspired us, and kept us on track and kept us remembering why we were doing this. And I think also being kind to yourself, having compassion to yourself in that process. Sometimes we can really drive ourselves or expect certain things of ourselves and beat ourselves up when it's not going great. Be compassionate. You're learning, You wouldn't expect a toddler to learn how to walk instantaneously, and us trying to recover is a similar process. You've got to be patient with yourselves and take the time and generally be nice to yourself in that process. Yeah. Yeah,
no, good. And I'm also curious, in the last few minutes, you've talked a little bit about that for you it was quite a gift in terms of how you changed and how your kind of experience of the world changed. And I was just curious a little bit about what life is like for you now, now that you're recovered, and, for people that are watching this that, as I say, either themselves are with ME or just struggling in life. And I think it's very inspirational when people kind of turn things around. So when you look back on your journey, what's maybe one of the key lessons that you take from that?
I think one of the key lessons is to understand that what's happening is a journey that we can learn from. And I think the point when I began to see what was going on for me, not just as something awful that had happened to me, but something I could use, I could learn from, I could grow from, and that would ultimately take me forwards and make me stronger. And I know that sounds very cliched, but that was the point when things began to turn around. And I think that's what I kind of used to cling to and used really to move me forwards. Life now is, in some ways, completely different, And in some ways, I'm still the same girl who was learning and developing and growing at different levels. But my capacity to work, to exercise is more than it ever was, from the age of sort of 13 upwards. So that certainly is a massive gift. And it's been a real education in understanding myself and the world, I think.
It's interesting, it's like you describe, you can be fully recovered from ME, and yet the journey of life still continues. And I think what's interesting, kind of listening to you speak, is that it's almost like the ME experience triggered that journey, which has been a gift beyond just your recovery, because it's been a gift of a way of approaching and experiencing your life.
I say to people quite often that you're learning to be healthy, and that in a way is an ongoing process, because you learn to be healthy to the point where you're physically healthy, but you're also learning beyond that how to be in the world and more of who you are, and that just keeps going, really. So it's the beginning of a journey for many people of understanding themselves at a much deeper level, much more powerful level, I think.
No, that's wonderful. Well, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
And you've been watching Conscious TV, and hopefully we will speak with you again soon.